In one scene, a unit of Japanese soldiers, not knowing that the war is over and still on the run from the enemy, is surrounded by British forces. Owing to the influence of their captain, a music school graduate, this particular unit often sang together. They were mid chorus when they realized they were being encircled by the British. They had left a cart loaded with ammunition cases out in the open nearby. If fighting broke out and the cart was hit in the crossfire, all their ammunition would explode. It was imperative that they move it. Hoping to convince the British troops that they were ignorant of their presence, the Japanese soldiers cheerfully continued singing Home Sweet Home and the Last Rose of Summer as they went about moving the cart to a safe place. When they finished their work, they stopped singing and prepared to attack. But at that moment, they heard the strains of Home Sweet Home resounding all around them. This time it was the British soldiers who were singing. Though the lyrics were English, it was the same song. This was followed up by a chorus of the last rose of summer. Both melodies were long-time favorites of the British and had made their way to Japan, where they were given Japanese lyrics. The Japanese unit's chorus of these well known songs had struck a deep chord in the British soldiers' hearts. Japanese and British soldiers alike raised their voices in song. In that instant, they forgot all about their distinctions of friend or foe. The fighting never started. The soldiers of both sides came out and shook hands with one another. The Japanese unit learned from the British that the war had ended 3 days earlier. The spiritual bond that had been forged between them through the power of song had prevented unnecessary bloodshed. Music and art know no boundaries. Although flavored by national characteristics, they have a universal power to move people's heart. As Shinichi took in sights of Rangoon, an idea formed in his mind, and as he contemplated and developed this idea, a clear, concrete image gradually emerged. The next day, February 9th, he and the others left Burma shortly before noon, now boarding a 2 hour flight to Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. Two men's division members from Japan were waiting to greet them on their arrival at the airport. Both men were still relatively young in faith, but they had resolved together to exert themselves in sharing the Daishonin's Buddhism with others. That evening, Shinichi and the others had dinner at a Japanese restaurant in Bangkok. A female employee addressed Shinichi. It turned out that she was a Gakkai member. Although she had not been very active in her Buddhist practice, she said she recognized Shinichi and Women's Division Chief Katsuki Ohara from photographs of them in the Seikyo Shimbun and other Gakkai publications she had seen back in Japan. When he had set out on this trip, Shinichi had expected there would be no members at all in some of the countries on their itinerary. But as it turned out, they had encountered members in every country they had visited thus far. After dinner, they returned to their hotel. There, they were visited by the two men who had welcomed them at the airport. The whole group gathered for an informal discussion outside in the hotel garden. Neither of these two local members seemed to have much of an idea about how to promote Koshunrufu activities. Shinichi offered them guidance in a straightforward and lucid manner. Practicing faith is nothing extraordinary. All you have to do is be consistent in your morning and evening gongyo. And if some around you are suffering over problems or worries, you can teach them about Buddhism. In other words, propagation proceeds quite naturally through cultivating friendships imbued with warm concern and empathy for those around you. There is no need to be impatient. When others who wish to join you in practicing faith appear, it will be important that you encourage and support each other. For that purpose, an organization will become necessary. If you wish, we can establish a district here in Thailand too in the near future. We'll also look into the possibility of regularly sending leaders from Japan to encourage you and provide guidance. In any event, the time of Kosunrufu is at hand. We are bound to see an increase in membership in Thailand from here on as well. It was still difficult for the two men to clearly envision an increase in Thailand's membership, but the idea of establishing a district provided them with a substantial goal they could work towards. Compared with America and Brazil, the seeds that had been sown for Kosanrufu in Thailand were extremely small and fragile. Nor was there any guarantee that these precious seeds would not be washed away with the slightest rain or carried off by the wind. Only by lovingly tending each seed and ensuring that it took root in society would a brilliant flowering of Kosunrufu be possible. The Soka Gakkai's efforts to disseminate the Darshanins' teachings were neither backed by national powers nor promoted through the dispatch of missionaries. The Soka Gakkai's propagation was based on the inner motivation of ordinary people who awoke to faith and stood up with a sense of mission in the communities or countries where they lived. That is why Shinichi devoted all his energy to trying to awaken a sense of mission in each person he met. The long trips was finally beginning to take its toll on everyone. Each member of the group was visibly exhausted. One reason Shinichi had suggested they dine at a Japanese restaurant was out of consideration for High Priest Nitatsu as well as the others. Everyone had grown tired of the unfamiliar local dishes and had begun to lose their appetite. Shinichi hoped that a Japanese meal would restore their spirits. When the two local Japanese members had left, Shinichi Yamamoto continued to chat with his colleagues in his room. Let's read the Gosho, he proposed. Taking out a copy of the Gosho from his bag, he leafed through the pages until he came to the record of the orally transmitted teachings. Shinichi read a passage from the section titled The Key Passage of each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra and its significance. If you exert 100 million eons of effort in a single moment of life, the three enlightened properties of the Buddha will appear within you at each moment. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo means diligent practice. This passage explains the lines from the emerging from the earth's 15th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. In order that day and night, with constant diligence, they may seek the Buddha way. What Nichiren Daishonin indicates here, Shinichi emphasized, is that if we concentrate infinite millennia worth of effort into our prayer when chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and exert ourselves earnestly in our Buddhist practice, we can bring forth the three enlightened properties of the Buddha at each moment of our lives. It also teaches us that chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo itself is the practice of diligently exerting oneself. While this passage gives expression to the state of life of the original Buddha, Nichiren Daishonin, in terms of our own lives, it means that if we exert ourselves and pray tirelessly for Kosen Rufu, we cannot fail to bring forth Buddha wisdom and great life force. Thus, it is possible to break through any deadlock and attain great victory. However, to achieve this, it is essential that we do not neglect making diligent efforts. We should always work, think, and strive twice as hard as others. All of us are beginning to feel the fatigue of our long journey. But we must remember that this is an important guidance trip that heralds the dawn of Kosenrufu in Asia. If we encounter even one member, we must encourage that person with all our strength and being. This will pave the way for the future. Also, as we familiarize ourselves with the people, culture, and circumstances of each country on this trip, we will have to think earnestly about what is needed to advance Koshinrufu there. If we don't stay focused, our trip will be over and we won't have accomplished a thing. Each moment is decisive. The Daishonin writes, carry through with your faith in the Lotus Sutra. You cannot strike fire from flint if you stop halfway. If you don't keep striking the pieces of flint together, you can't hope to produce fire. In the same way, if you are negligent or allow yourselves to succumb to inertia, you will end up in defeat.